All right, students, I'm going to work through this review. On the first problem, this is in vertex form. So you first want to write down what your vertex is. Your vertex is your h and your k. Now remember, h lies to you, so the vertex is +3, +1. Start by graphing that. Now, in order to get two other points, what you're going to do is you're going to pick an x value on either side of it. So I can pick this x value right here, which is 2, and this value right here, which is 4. And we're going to make a table out of those values. So those are my x values. So I'm going to put in a 2 and I'm going to put in a 4. Now these are going to be symmetrical points about your axis of symmetry. Remember, your axis of symmetry is the line of symmetry, so it's always going to go through your vertex. It's always going to be x equals whatever your h value is. So my h value is 3. So I'm going to pick those values on either side, 2 and 4. And let's go ahead and plug those in. So if I plug in a 2 to this equation, I'll have y equals 2 times, plugging in a 2 value for x, so 2 minus 3 squared plus 1. Well, 2 minus 3 is -1. -1 squared is +1. So then you're going to have 2 times +1 plus 1. So that would be 2 plus 1, which is 3. So your y value is 3 when your x value is 2. So let's go ahead and graph that. That's going to be right here. Now remember, you will have that symmetrical point right here, which is going to be 4, 3. So you really only have to plug in one number so that you can figure out what that other point is. So now let's go ahead and graph it. And the only other question I need to ask, or they want me to answer, is it a maximum or a minimum? Well, they're talking about this vertex right here. Is that vertex a maximum point on the graph or a minimum point? Well, it's down there at the bottom, so that would be a minimum. All right, let's go on to the next one. Now, the next one is in intercept form. So remember, when it's in intercept form, if you take those factors and set them equal to 0, then that's going to give you your x-intercepts. So I would take x minus 1, set it equal to 0. That means I would add 1 to both sides, so your x is equal to 1. So one of my x-intercepts is at 1, 0. Then I can also do x plus 4 equals 0. So I would have to subtract 4, and that gives you x equals -4. So another x-intercept is at -4, 0. Now, to find your axis of symmetry, it's going to be right in the middle. So what you can do is you can take those values that you just found and add them up and then divide by 2. So that's going to give you -3 halves. So that would be the same thing as -1.5. So my axis of symmetry is going to be right here. Okay, so that would be x equals -3/2. Now the vertex is also going to be on that axis of symmetry, which means it's going to have the same x-coordinate as the axis of symmetry. Now I would need to plug that in to be able to find what my y value is. So I'm going to take that equation, y equals -3, but in place of x, I'm putting -3 halves. Okay, so that's what you would have. Now go ahead and multiply all of that together. Now you'd probably want to use a calculator for that, and it comes out to be 18.75. So because this only goes up to 10, let's go ahead and count by 2. So this would be 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, and just a little bit more. So that's where your vertex would be. And now you can go ahead and graph it. Now, if I asked you if the vertex was a maximum or a minimum, this one would be considered a maximum because it's at the top. And so my x-intercepts were what I started with. That was 1, 0, and negative 4, 0. All right, the next one. If the graph of the parent function y equals x plus 4 quantity squared minus 1 is reflected across the x-axis, translated 3 units to the left and 4 units up, what's the new equation? So when it's reflected across the x-axis, remember that's going to put a negative out front. If it's translated 3 units to the left, remember that lies to you, so you're going to add 3 on the inside. And then 4 units up would be adding 4 to this last number. So the new equation would be y equals negative x plus 7 squared, and then plus 3. On number 4, how does the graph of y equals 1/2 times x minus 4 squared plus 7 compare to its parent function y equals x squared? So you want to look at the 3 different pieces. So the 1/2 out front, that's going to be a vertical compression by 1/2. Remember, anything that is between 0 and 1 is a compression, and an a value that's larger than 1 would be a vertical stretch. Then when I look at the minus 4 inside here, that's going to be a shift to the right, 4. And then the plus 7 at the end, that represents a shift up 7. Okay, on this next group, we're going to use factoring to solve, and then we want to use our factors to find the solutions. So on the first one, remember when you're factoring, you always want to look for a GCF. Well, this one has a GCF of 6x. If I divide everything by 6x, when I divide this by 6x, I have x. When I divide this by 6x, I have a minus 4. Now, because I have nothing squared left over, then these are my factors. So 6x times x minus 4, those are my factors. But then, to get your solutions, remember you have to set each of your factors equal to 0. So I'm going to set 6x equal to 0. That means I divide both sides by 6. 0 divided by 6 is 0. So one of my solutions is x equals 0. Then when I set x minus 4 equal to 0, I would add 4 to both sides, and that would give you x equals 4. So then that's another solution. Now remember, solutions also represent your x-intercepts. So I would also accept you writing it as an x-intercept, 0, 0, and 4, 0. You can write it either way. All right, let's look at this next one. When I look at 4x squared minus 12x plus 9, it does not have a GCF. It has 3 terms, so now you need to make your A times your C chart. My A is 4, my C is 9. That's going to give me 36, so I need factors of 36 that are going to add up to negative 12. Oops, negative 12. Let's redo that. Okay, well, that's going to be negative 6 times negative 6. Negative 6 times negative 6 does give you 36, and negative 6 plus negative 6 gives you negative 12. So you're going to bring down that first term, split your middle term into what you just found, which was negative 6x, and then bring down your plus 9. So when you factor, you're going to group the first 2 and group the last 2, and then look for the GCF of each group. So here I can divide both of those by 2x. When I divide this by 2x, I'm going to have 2x left over. When I divide this by 2x, I'm going to have minus 3. This one I definitely want to divide by a negative, and both of these are divisible by 3. So negative 3 is what I'm dividing. Negative 6x divided by negative 3 is positive 2x. 9 divided by negative 3 is minus 3. So your parentheses that match, that's your first factor. Your second factor comes from what's on the outside, but as you can tell, those are the same factor, so you could also write it like this. Okay? Since they're the same factor, I really only need to set one of them equal to 0 to get my solutions, because the other one would be the exact same answer. So I'm going to add 3, so that would be 2x equals 3, and then I divide both sides by 2. So my solution is x equals 3 over 2, or we could say that's 1.5. All right, we're still trying to get the factors and the solution. So on number 7, I look for a GCF. There's not one. Now I do notice that this is 2 terms, and so I want to see if I can write this as a difference of squares. Well, 25x squared is the same thing as 5x squared. And then subtract what squared gives you 81, 9. So this is a difference of squares. So if you remember, your difference of squares factors will be the first parenthesis, 5x, plus the second parenthesis, and then 5x minus 9. So there's your factors. Now you would want to set them equal to 0. So I'd take 5x plus 9, set that equal to 0, and take 5x minus 9 and set it equal to 0. So this I would subtract 9. So 5x equals negative 9. And then I would divide by 5. So x equals negative 9/5. So there's one of my solutions. And then over here I would add 9 and then divide by 5. So this would be positive 9 over 5. All right, let's look at the next one. So 2x squared minus x equals 3. Well, the first thing, I have to get it equal to 0, so I would have to subtract 3 to the other side, and so then you would have 2x squared minus x minus 3 equals 0. There's not a GCF because I can't divide anything out of everything, so I'm going to make my AC chart. 2 times negative 3 is negative 6, and I'm looking for factors of negative 6 that add up to negative 1. So that would be negative 3 times 2. So bring down your 2x squared. Split this into negative 3x plus 2x, and then bring down your minus 3. So your first group and your second group. The first group I can divide out an x, and then I'll be left with 2x minus 3. The second group, there's nothing you can divide out of that, but remember, you can always divide by 1, and so then you'd still have 2x minus 3. So your factors are 2x minus 3 times x plus 1. Now we're going to have to set those equal to 0. Okay, so I'm going to do that right here. If I take 2x minus 3 and set that equal to 0, I would add 3, so 2x equals 3, divide by 2, so x equals 3 over 2. The second one, x plus 1 equals 0. I would subtract 1, so x equals negative 1. And there's your solutions. All right, let's move on to the next one. So we've got 63 equals 3y plus 6y squared. I do want to subtract the 63 over here, okay? But let's rewrite that in standard form. So we're going to have 0 equals, the 6y squared needs to come first, and then the 3y, and then minus 63. Now you do have a GCF. We can divide all of that by 3. So let's take that out. So you'll have 2y squared plus y minus 21. And let's go through our factoring. So 2 times negative 21 is going to give us negative 42. And we're looking for factors of negative 42 that add up to 1. So that would be positive 7 and negative 6. All right, so we're going to have 3 times, we're going to bring this down, 2y squared. I'm going to change this to brackets. 2y squared, then we've got plus 7y minus 6y, and then minus 21. So our first group, and then our last group. So the 3 is just going to come on down. In this first group, we can divide by y, and then you'll have 2y plus 7 left over. In this last group, we can divide by a negative 3, and again, we're going to have 2y plus 7 left over. So our factors are 3 times the parenthesis that matches, 2y plus 7, times the outside piece, y minus 3. Now, we don't have to set this 3 equal to 0. You don't have to do that because there's not a variable there. But you are going to have to set this one equal to 0 and this one equal to 0. So when I do that, my y value is going to be, if I subtract 7, then I would have to divide by 2. So that would be a negative 7 over 2. Hopefully you're okay with me just doing that in my head. Here I would have to add 3. So when you add 3, your y value is going to equal 3. And there's your solutions. All right, let's look at this next one. 6n squared minus 3n minus 3. So we can divide all of those by 3. And we're going to have 2n squared minus n minus 1. So let's make our AC chart. 2 times negative 1 is negative 2, and it has to multiply to give us that, but add up to give us negative 1. So that's going to be negative 2 and positive 1. So we've got 3. We're going to bring down the 2n squared. Then we're going to have a minus 2n plus n, and then minus 1. Group, group. Just bring the 3 down. We can pull out a 2n of that first group. So we have n minus 1. The last group, we can just divide by 1. And then we'll still have n minus 1. So you're going to have factors of 3, parenthesis, the matching parenthesis, n minus 1. And then you're also going to have 2n plus 1. Again, you don't have to set the 3 equal to 0 because there's not a variable there, but you do need to set this one equal to 0 and this one equal to 0. So here I would add 1, so that would give you n equals 1. Here I would subtract 1 and then have to divide by 2, so I'd have n equals negative 1/2. Now, there's a lot of factoring on this review, but I will say there's not as much factoring on the test. So I'd put a lot on here to kind of refresh your memory because we're going to be using it in the next unit as well, but it's not covered as much on the test. All right, moving on to number 11. It says the vertex of a parabola is at negative 1, 5. So I'm going to go ahead and graph that. So here's my vertex. And it says another point on the parabola is 1, 9, which would be right here. Use this information to determine another point of the parabola and explain how you found the additional point. Well, remember, when you have your vertex, right, you've got an axis of symmetry that is going to go right through your vertex. That's going to cut that parabola into 2 equal parts. So if I connect this side, I should also have another point that is the same distance from that axis of symmetry. So that's 2 away, so I should also have a point right there, which that point is the point negative 3, 9. And you can find it because it is the symmetrical point to the point 1, 9. All right, number 12, it says list all the names used for solutions of quadratic equations. Well, we can use that. Solutions are your x-intercepts. So one word would be x-intercepts. And then think of the other words that we use for x-intercepts. Zeros, roots, all of those mean the same thing. So whether I ask you for roots, zeros, or solutions, I'm asking you to find the x-intercepts. Okay, find the value of c that will make the expression x squared plus 14x plus c a perfect square trinomial. This is coming from completing the square. When you are completing the square, remember how I'd have you write or draw a line there? Well, what are you having to put in there? Well, remember, it's always going to be your b over 2 squared. That's what's going to go into that position. So that must be what c is. So my b is 14, 14. I'm going to divide that by 2, and then I'm going to square that. So that would be 7 squared, which is 49. So that c value that I would have to use to complete the square is 49. A lot of you had this on your quiz as well. Okay, what is the vertex of the quadratic function? Hopefully you can do this very easily now. Remember, your vertex is your h and your k, but remember your h lies to you, so this should be 5, -2. All right, last few problems. So number 15, find the vertex and the axis of symmetry for the quadratic y equals -x squared minus 4x minus 5. Well, this is in standard form. So remember, when you have it in standard form, to find your vertex, the x value of your vertex can be found by using this formula, -b over 2a. So my b is -4. When I do the negative of -4, that's +4. And then I'm going to do 2 times my a value, which is -1. So that's going to be 4 divided by -2, which is equal to -2. So the x value of my vertex is -2. Now, since that's my x value, remember, you can always plug in your x value into the equation. So I'm going to plug in a -2 here and here so that then I can find my y value. Okay, so let's do that. So we'll have y equals think of that as -1 times my x, which is -2, squared minus 4 times -2, and then minus 5. Well, remember, you have to do parentheses and exponents first. So you have to do -2 squared, which is 4, but that's going to get multiplied by -1. Then you have -4 times -2, which is +8, and then minus 5. So -1 times 4 is -4 plus 8 minus 5. So this would give you a y value of -1. So my y value of my vertex is -1. So this is your vertex. And then remember, your axis of symmetry is always x equals whatever your h is. So my axis of symmetry is x equals -2. All right, let's move on to number 16. So number 16, it says complete the square to write the equation in vertex form. All right, so if I'm going to complete the square, so I want to first move your c over. So we're going to subtract 7. So we've got y minus 7, and then remember to leave a space, equals x squared plus 6x, leave a space. So you're going to have to complete the square by doing b over 2 squared. Well, your b is 6. Divide that by 2, you get 3, and then square it. So this is going to give you a +9, which your a value is 1, so you don't have to worry about multiplying by anything. You're just going to add 9 to the other side. So then you're going to have y plus 2 equals, now remember, this will always factor as a binomial squared. It'll always be x, and then just take that and divide it by 2. So 6 divided by 2 is 3. So that's what goes there. And then the last thing you have to do is just bring that 2 back over. So your vertex form is y equals x plus 3 squared, quantity squared. But then you'd have to subtract that 2 over here, so minus 2. And that gives you your vertex of -3, -2. Okay, let's try this last one. We're completing the square again. Okay, so we're going to subtract 23. Y minus 23, leave a space, equals x squared minus 16x, leave a space. Remember, what goes in there is your b value divided by 2 squared. So that's going to be -8 squared, which is positive 64. And that's going to go there and there because my a value is 1. So then this would give you y plus 41. This would be x minus 8 quantity squared. Remember, you're just going to take half of this. And then you just need to subtract that 41 over. So y equals x minus 8 quantity squared minus 41. Your vertex is positive 8, negative 41. All right, I believe that is it. So hopefully that was helpful for you, and just let me know if you have any questions.